All right, the other preliminary issue I'd like to highlight is this concept of fairness. As we see in the preamble leading up to the Fairness Doctrine regulation, the complaints were that the resource was being used in an unfair fashion, and the FCC is trying to pass a regulation that they think will solve that problem and make sure that the resource is used fairly. But this issue of fairness is a central concept in ethical theory and applied ethics. And so in addition to this background historical issue, I want to highlight the ethics issue in case. And here the question is, what exactly do we mean by fairness, right? And one of the very fascinating things about ethical theory is people will, in many cases, agree on a concept, right? We're in favor of honesty and justice and fairness, right, and so forth. But when we start to push harder and say, what exactly do you mean that concept, and does it apply to this case or not? People have dramatically different judgments about what the proper application is, and in many cases, what the concept itself means. And that is certainly true in the case of fairness. So what I'd like to do is, given that we're talking about an abstract, somewhat intangible telecommunications medium here, in many cases, those abstract cases, it's harder to apply abstract concepts, right, of fairness. So I want to try a more applied, practical example that we can wrap our minds around. When I was younger, I used to be a pretty good basketball player, and I enjoyed playing basketball on a regular basis. And one of my little fantasies back when I was younger was to play basketball against Michael Jordan, who was the greatest basketball player ever, right, in my judgment. So I would have this little fantasy if I was out shooting baskets by myself and so on, that sometime, I'm playing at the playground or whatever, Michael Jordan comes along, and I know who he is, and I say, wow, would you like to play some basketball against me? And then for some strange reason he agrees, and so we're going to play some one-on-one basketball. Now the question is going to be, would a game of basketball between Michael Jordan and Stephen Hicks be a fair game? And the thing I want to put to you is that we should be able to say yes and no, that from a certain angle, Stephen Hicks playing Michael Jordan, no matter how it turns out, would be a fair game. But also from another angle, Stephen Hicks playing Michael Jordan would be completely unfair. And so what I want to do is tease out those two conceptions of fairness at work. So, suppose Michael Jordan agrees, we play the basketball game. Suppose we even bring in someone to be a referee who's not a friend of Michael or a friend of mine, and that person impartially adjudicates, applies the rules of the basketball. So if I double dribble, I get charged. If Michael fouls me, he gets charged, and so forth. So the rules of basketball are followed, and the end result of the game is Michael wins, of course, by a blowout. Say he scores 100 points in a half an hour, and I score 3 points, right, in a half an hour. So the game is over, Michael wins, and the question then is, was that a fair game? All right, let's take the two possible positions, right? One side is going to say, absolutely not. That would be a completely unfair game. All right. And we say, all right, why is that unfair? Right? What's the problem here? And then this side would say, well, look, if you compare, so to speak, the skills with respect to basketball, right? Michael Jordan has awesome basketball skills, and I've got some basketball skills, but my basketball skills are rather moderate. So what we have is unequal skills, fairly dramatically. If we look at the assets, so to speak, the physical assets that Michael Jordan is bringing to the game, right? So he is, I believe, 6'6" or so. I'm about 6 feet. His arm span length is much longer than mine. His vertical jumping ability is much greater than mine. I think I have about a 10-inch vertical clearance. His vertical clearance is over 3 feet. And so in terms of all of those physical dimensions, we have a great deal of inequality as well. If we also then look at the experience right, that we're bringing to the game, right? He plays a whole lot more than I do. He plays against people who are also professionals. I play occasionally, and I play against other people who are amateurs, and so we have unequal experience. And then if we put all of that together ahead of time, we should be able to predict that really the opportunity, right, or the likelihood that Stephen Hicks has a chance at all of winning the game is extraordinarily low. And so what we have is the chance of winning is also, right, dramatically unequal. And so the game is completely unfair because Stephen Hicks has no chance of winning, and the reason why he has no chance of winning is that he is extremely unequal with respect to all of these effects over here. All right, so what we would have to do then, this is the concept of unfair, to make things fair is in some sense equalize the chance of the two parties winning. We notice that the common denominator in all of these cases is inequality. And so fairness from this perspective is tied to making things, right, dramatically equal. And so this side would then say, all right, well, how can we equalize the skill level here? Well, I believe Michael Jordan is a right-handed shooter, and maybe when he's shooting his jump shots with his right hand, he has an 80% success rate. I'm a left-handed shooter, and when I shoot jump shots, I have say a 50% success rate. And so we have an unequal skill level here. Well, maybe we could change the rules of basketball a little bit for this game and make Michael Jordan shoot with his left hand. Right? And maybe with his left hand, he has about a 50% accuracy rate. And so that then means that his skill with his left hand is roughly equal to my skill with the left hand. And so that then equalizes the game and makes things fairer. Or we might say with respect to physique, Michael Jordan has this, I don't know, I'm just going to say a 42-inch vertical clearance. Stephen Hicks has the 12-inch vertical clearance, right, or whatever the number is. So maybe we should handicap Michael, right, to a certain extent. We will make him wear 5-pound weights or 10-pound weights on each ankle. And we can test this ahead of time so that when he is wearing those weights and does his vertical clearance is about the same as my vertical clearance. And so we equalize the physique issue. Or maybe we will equalize chances and we'll say, all right, first game, Stephen Hicks got 3 points, Michael Jordan got 100 points. So what we should do this time is give Stephen Hicks a 97-point head start at the beginning of the game. And so that then will equalize the two parties' chances of winning the game and so forth. So the idea here is equalizing is what is necessary for fairness. And so what we have is the notion of fairness is tied very closely to the notion of equality in the sense of bringing equal assets, equal chances to the table. All right, now if we don't agree, right, with that side of the argument, if our initial judgment was to say Stephen Hicks playing Michael Jordan in basketball, that was perfectly fair, right? What is going on in saying that that was a fair game? What kinds of things would this side be arguing? Well, their conclusion is that this is a fair game. And one of the relevant factors they will say is, well, look, Stephen Hicks went into this game knowing what basketball is. He knows what the rules of basketball are. He knows what his skill level approximately is. He knows who Michael Jordan is, and that's, of course, one of the big reasons why he wants to play against him. But what we have are two things that is sort of an informed, right, voluntary consent to play in the game, right? Nobody made me play basketball against Michael Jordan. I wasn't being conned about who I was playing basketball against, and so I chose in an informed way to enter into this particular competition, and that would be relevant. Maybe if someone had a gun to my head, or if it was a pool shark, changing the sport a little bit, who was misleading me, right, about who I'm playing against, that would be an unfairness, right, built into it. But in this case, those things do not operate. Also important here is that we have rules that are not stacked against one party or the other. The rules of basketball, right, specify, right, the dribbling, the number of points you get, whether it's inbounds, what is outbounds, various time things, this, that, and the other thing. And so what we have is rules that are not designed to advantage one party or anybody. And so we have rules that are impartial. And also, I mentioned that we bring in someone who is a referee to adjudicate the rules and to enforce the rules, and we say that that person is unbiased. So the rules are not stacked in favor of one person, right, or the other, or applied in favor of one person, right, or against the other. Now, this side, of course, is mentioning that we are bringing unequal assets to the table. This side will say, well, that is completely fair, because why does Michael Jordan have so much more basketball skills? Well, that is because he worked at it, right? He loves basketball, he practiced basketball a whole lot more, and so he is entitled to use the skills that he has acquired by his own efforts in the case of the basketball game. And the same thing holds for me. I worked at basketball to a certain amount, and so I'm entitled to bring those skills. So the point here is, whatever assets we are bringing to the table, those are earned. And then we say the final result, Michael scores 100 points, I scored the 3 points. Well, he earned his 100 points. He got them fair and square, right, so to speak. Emphasis on the fair word there. According to the rules of basketball that we have agreed to play by, he earned those points, and so the just thing is that he gets those 100 points. I also earned my 3 points fair and square by the rules of the basketball game, and so I deserve those points as well. And the overall point of justice then is Michael gets the victory because all of these things are true. Okay, so what we are emphasizing then on the side that says, yes, indeed, this would be a fair game, is informed voluntary consent, impartial rules, and each party earning, right, what they get out of the result. And so we do not equalize, right, so to speak. We do not, right, handicap parties, at least not when we're talking about adult participations, right, and so forth. Instead, fairness, right, is tied not to equality in the sense, right, that's over here, but rather it's tied to people making their own choices, right, and respecting the choices, the competitions that people choose to enter into. It means being voluntary. It involves impartiality, right, in the structure of the rules and their adjudication and application, and it means people earning, right, what they get, right, out of the competition by their own efforts, right, under these circumstances. All right, so with that as background, let's now turn to the arguments for and against the fairness doctrine as applied to telecommunications.